1 Corinthians 5, dealing with sexual sin in the church. In this chapter, Paul addresses the issue of sexual immorality. Paul rebukes the Corinthian church for its tolerance of this sin. He provides instructions on how to apply church discipline in such cases. Exegesis by sections and verses. Verses 1 to 5, Immorality in the church. Paul begins by addressing a reported case of sexual immorality among the Corinthians, which involved a man having a sexual relationship with his father's wife. This was a sin not even tolerated among pagans. He confronts the church for their pride and lack of appropriate action. Instead of mourning and removing the wrongdoer from their midst, they were tolerating the sin. Paul, although absent in body but present in spirit, has already passed judgment on the man. He instructs the Corinthians that when they are assembled together in the name of the Lord Jesus and his power, to deliver this man to Satan for the destruction of the flesh. The hope is that his spirit may be saved in the day of the Lord. Verses 6 to 8, the leaven of malice and evil. Using the metaphor of leaven, which is yeast, Paul warns the Corinthians that a little leaven leavens the whole lump, meaning a little sin can corrupt the entire church at Corinth. He urges them to remove the old leaven of sin, so that they may become new, as they are unleavened. Paul encourages them to celebrate the feast of the Passover, which is the Lord's Supper, not with the old leaven of malice and evil, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Verses 9 to 13, dealing with immorality in the church. Paul refers to a previous letter in which he advised them not to associate with sexually immoral people. He says that he didn't mean the immoral, or the greedy and robbers, or idolaters of the world. He clarifies that if that were the case, believers would need to go out of the world. He writes to them to not associate with anyone who is called a brother, if he is guilty of sexual immorality or greed, or is an idolater, reviler, drunkard, or swindler. They were not even to eat with such a person. Paul concludes by stating that while it is not their responsibility to judge those outside the church, they are to judge those who are inside. God will judge those who are outside the church, but they are to purge the evil person from among them. Overall summary. 1 Corinthians chapter 5 is a significant part of Paul's letter that confronts a case of sexual immorality within the Corinthian church. Paul addresses the church's lack of action and their tolerance of the sin, urging them to exercise church discipline. He uses the metaphor of leaven to illustrate the pervasive influence of sin within the church and calls for purity. Paul concludes by providing clear instructions on how the church should discipline such sin. He insists that they have a responsibility to judge those within the church and remove the wrongdoer from their midst.